If this is your first time visiting this data set, I would encourage you to take a look at where Michigan falls aligned to the NAEP data versus where a lot of the Smarter Balance schools and the Park schools fall, and Massachusetts having the highest cut scores on their state test. When they do this alignment, they can actually begin to measure every county, every district, and every school in the nation and how they compare to the average, noting each dot as they plot the different schools or districts or as they show a map of the nation. The interactive tool can be found at edopportunity.org. And there are 3 different ways that they report their measures. And I am going to suggest that we start with learning rates, because that is a student growth measure following kids from 3rd grade to 4th grade to 5th grade, or if you're a middle school, from 6th grade to 7th grade to 8th grade. And what you can see from this interactive tool is that every school district in the nation is shown provided they have enough students. Where you see gray areas, they do not have enough students to run that data by school district, so you could always change this to the county. Of course, in several states, the district is the county, so that is fairly common. What you'll see in terms of the county and in terms of student growth, you'll see a lot of growth happening on the west of the nation, and certainly in Wisconsin as well, as all of the green that you see on the map is above the national average. You'll see a mixture here of green and white and blue within Michigan, and you'll see much more blue down in the southeast with Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. We can zoom in on just about any county in Michigan, and we can see that anything that's in the white is near the average, and anything that's in the green is above the national average in terms of growth. We can also adjust this to see any school district in the state, and you'll notice on my lower right hand corner there is a scatter plot with all of the schools that I could make larger by clicking on the chart here, or I can have a side-by-side comparison with a chart in the map. For our learning rates or our growth, I'm just going to leave it on the map because the charts tend to track from the poorest schools to the richest schools, and you don't see a relationship to poverty in terms of student growth like you do with achievement that we'll cover in the next podcast. But what you are able to do is you are able to identify some of the fastest growing school districts in the state of Michigan, and you can look up any of your districts as well. You can hone in a little bit on the west side or the east side or in a particular region, and you can drill down even further to the individual schools. And once you drill down to the individual schools, you're going to see more gray dots where the data is just not available because the school is too small to really color code that white, blue, or green. Finally, I'd like to point out that at the school level, we're not going to have as much data across the nation on learning rates or student growth, but at the district data, at the district level or at the county level, you do see more data, and you'll also see that it pulls up all students, which means that you can actually run a filter to find out where some of the school districts are that are achieving the greatest learning rates or having the most effect on students growing from year to year for poor students, for example. And what you'll see is, again, the blue represents slower growth and the green represents faster growth. And Tennessee has a lot of growth compared to the states surrounding it for students in poverty. We can also look at different ethnic groups, and we can take a look, for example, at Hispanic populations, and where there's not a strong population for Hispanics, you'll see a lot more gray across the nation because they simply do not have enough students to be able to register on this interactive map. To help with that, you can always move to the county level, and you can, based on the county level, gather a few more students, and you can see a little bit where Michigan actually has some nice green areas here, as well as the western portion of the nation, and you don't see as much growth in our southeast of our nation. Finally, I want to highlight that among the groups, you can also look at the gap between each of the groups. For example, the white and black gap. And what you'll see in this area is that most schools have a gap between Caucasian and African American. And you'll see where some of the schools are a little bit lighter color that have closed down that gap a little bit. However, when we do a gap analysis, keep in mind that the gap could be because both white and black subgroups are performing very low, so the gap is small. What we would hope is that if the gap is small, both white and black subgroups are performing very well. Growth is a very effective first step for looking at some of the data. And I would encourage you to take a look at all students to begin with, and feel free to zoom in and out of the map, moving the map around and looking at your own schools or looking for bright spots across the nation. In addition to looking at learning rates, we're also going to want to look at the average test scores, which we will cover in the next podcast. And I would like you to note that when we switch over to average test scores, we're going to see how much of an impact poverty has, and you could almost draw a line to predict that our wealthier areas are going to achieve higher and that our more impoverished areas will achieve lower. So for the average test scores, which we'll cover, I do suggest that we look at the side-by-side chart and map as we do take a look at that. But that will be for the next podcast. I hope this was helpful.